What's up, guys? This is Heis, and I think it's finally time we tell the story and make it its own dedicated video. If you've been around the channel for a long time, you've heard this story once, twice, or maybe 5 times at this point. But it's a good one, and it still feels like new people are coming to the channel and haven't heard this story, and it ends up getting buried in live streams or videos or whatever. So it's time to tell the BNSF poop story. Well, one of them. The significant poop story. There are unfortunately several poop stories from when I worked at BNSF. Maybe another video. There you go. For context, right out of college, I worked for the BNSF Railway. I was a management trainee, later mechanical foreman, did that for about 3 years. And it was a pretty fun job on the good days, and on some of the bad days, it was a little less fun, and the hours were not ideal. I mean, it was a true railroad gig, like night shift, day shift, whatever, and they expected you to work more than 40 hours a week, and that's kind of what you sign up for. But it was management, and that was the whole thing, and that was not for me. So I sought greener pastures and moved on into doing some train control, systems engineering, and design engineering, and all that sort of stuff shortly thereafter. But I accrued my fair share of stories. I worked at the Inner Bay Roundhouse in Seattle, Washington, the old Great Northern Roundhouse built in 1929. And I suppose it's old now, but it's not the old roundhouse. The original roundhouse was built lower down and suffered from some flooding issues, because Inner Bay is called Inner Bay because it used to be a bay, and then they filled it in and built a train yard. So you could see that water was still probably a problem in the early days of the railroad there. But what concerns us with Inner Bay on this day and in this story is the BNSF 1676. I still remember the darn road number of this locomotive. I don't know why I remember road numbers so well, but some of the particular ones stick out, and the 1676 is a special one. So down at Inner Bay, we have what we call the DSF, the Diesel Servicing Facility, where you'd do an SFS, a sand fuel service. Locomotives would come in, the first thing they would do would go across the pad, which was a location where you had 2 tracks, 4 spots. You could service the locomotives, give them sand, give them fuel, give them a mechanical look over, top up the oil, anything like that, add the crew packs, clean out the cabs, all that sort of stuff. And then either they'd go back out and pull trains, or if they were coming into the shop for another reason, they would then go up to the roundhouse and get worked on or get in the queue, depending on how many engines we had. And 1676 shows up, and it had no defects on it. It was just coming in for a service or something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I remember specifically there were no write-ups on this locomotive. The train crews could call in, or they could add in defects saying like, hey, there's a problem with this locomotive, and sometimes there were nothing, like, okay, well, this one little thing in the cab is broken and it doesn't affect operation, but it needs to be fixed. Or it could be, oh, there's something that prevents us from using a crew in the locomotive, like the throttle doesn't work, the controllers don't work, but it's still okay for power if it's MU'd. Or it could be that the engine's just blown up and done and whatever, and it needs to be dragged to the shop. And maybe defect levels could be another video. If you're interested, let me know. Anyway, no defects on this engine, comes in for a service, and thought nothing of it until I got a call from one of our laborers. I had 4 different crafts at my shop: machinists, electricians, pipe fitters, and laborers. And the laborers were the union that were in charge of cleaning the engines, resupplying them with crew packs, cleaning the toilets, dealing with all that stuff, and moving power around. So they would drive the engines and consists of engines and put them in their places to be worked on by the other crafts. I get a call from one of the laborers on the radio, and he goes, inside hostler to mechanical foreman. Oh, okay, this is the mechanical foreman. What's going on? I think the 1676 needs to come to the roundhouse. Okay. What's the deal? He goes, well, the toilet was full, so I went to dump it, hooked up the dump cart to the pipe. There's a pipe that they attach this little portable wagon to dump all of the sadness into. Hooked up the dump cart, dumped the toilet, went to go dump the dump cart out, and nothing came out of the dump cart. It's like, okay, one eyebrow's going up. Continues on, and he goes, so I went back over to the 1676 and checked the toilet, and there's nothing in the toilet. And so in my very professional management manner, I went, so where did the poop go? And my labor, being more professional than I was, as the boss just goes, yeah, that's why I think it needs to go to the roundhouse. We don't know. I'm like, okay. So I told him to bring it up into the shop, brought it up into the shop. I grabbed a pipe fitter. Pipe fitters were responsible for all the piping and hoses and things, and the toilet, the mechanical portions of the toilet. Like if you had to replace a toilet, it was a pipe fitter. If you needed to clean a toilet, it was a laborer. The whole division of labor in a railroad shop is a whole fun facta thing and always has been. So I call my pipe fitter, a guy named Feller. He was sweetheart, one of the most badass guys you've ever worked with in a shop. Just take care of whatever and just get it done. Like, he was an awesome dude to work with. I got with Feller and I was like, hey, so this happened. Like, I'm new management. Like, I don't really know diesel locomotives. I came from doing some steam engine stuff. The guys kind of ran the show, and I just tried to coordinate the best I could and give them what they needed. That was really my job, was make sure that, hey, this is the work we have. You guys are going to take care of it. Let me know what you need, and I will do my best to provide it, kind of thing, because I was far from an expert on diesel engines. And so I said, Feller, I don't know what the steps are in troubleshooting the mysterious disappearing poop. And he just goes, well, I'll have to pull the toilet and kind of go from there and tell you what I see. Like, okay, well, let's do that then. So he goes and works on it for a little bit and comes back into my office and calls me over and he's like, yeah, so the angle elbow that comes off the bottom of the toilet itself is kind of like an RV style contained tank because it was modded in later after the engine was built, because this is an older engine, SD40, probably 1970s vintage. And so it's like a toilet seat built onto kind of a tank, and then underneath the tank, there's an elbow to that pipe where the labor hooked up and everything. And he goes, yeah, the dump pipe is broken off and fell down into the plenum, which is the chunk of frame underneath the floor above the trucks and everything. There's a pretty big cavity in there. And I go, okay. He's like, well, I'm going to have to cut the floor out now, and I'm going to have to retrieve the pipe and hook it back up and go from there. And it's like, okay, well, isn't that going to be gross? And he's like, well, yeah, but we'll kind of see what it is and whatever. And for context, if you're not familiar with a diesel locomotive, the nose of the diesel locomotive is where the toilet is, usually. I mean, depends on the type. SD40's got a smaller nose. It's not a wide cab, small compartment. I mean, it's still pretty big, though. It doesn't look that big in the context of a locomotive, but it's still a good 6 or 7 feet wide and probably 7 or 10 feet long. I mean, it's a good size area, and some of the early engines just kind of had a hatch that you would just drop down in, and some of them actually had a staircase that got modded in to go down to them. And then the more modern locomotives made by GE or the later EMDs actually had like a proper bathroom and things set up that wasn't just kind of thrown in later. Crew comfort, what's that? Railroad, it's fine. And so Feller's going to go and cut the floor out of the whole nose. And he goes and he's working. This is second shift. Shift started at 2, ended at 10. Had the engine in the house probably by like 4. Feller was cutting the floor out. He probably came back about 6, maybe 7. And he comes into my office and he's got earplugs in his nose. And he just goes, "You need to come take a look at this, and I'm not fixing it." I go, oh dear God. Like, what? And side note, at this point, I'm telling this story like, oh my God, this is a bad day. I didn't have to deal with this. This was just a hilarious thing that happened looking back. I mean, it wasn't that fun and coordinating and whatever. I had not the issues that poor Feller did and the people you'll hear about later. They were the ones who really had to deal with this. I was just the manager of this literal poop show. So I go and I put my blue flag tag on the blue flag and get on the engine, and I open the cab door, walk in the cab, and I've never been slapped in the face with as bad a smell as quickly before this or after this. I've never experienced anything like it. Like, it was just like light switch, bam, the worst thing you've ever smelled. Whoa, all right, that's a little poopy. And I want to say 1676 had the stairwell. And so I'm walking down the stairwell and I got my flashlight. And it's just, he's cut the floor out and removed it. And it is just, the air plenum, which is like 18 inches deep or whatever it is just absolutely full of shit and piss. I mean, it was like a lake of piss with scenic poo vistas and mountains that had formed over presumably months to years just underneath the floor of this engine. And it's like, oh dear God, how has this never been written up? How has there never been a smelly toilet defect put on this? Like, that is a defect in the system, is smelly toilet. How has that never been written up on this locomotive? Dear Christ. Like, ridiculous. Like, I wish I had a picture. I wish I took a picture, but I was so horrified and like, oh my God, get me out of this place, that I didn't get a picture of it. So I get off the engine and I go tell my coworker, who is senior to me, this is my first or second year working with the railroad. It's still pretty fresh. And I walked over to him and I was like, dude, this happened. What do we do? And he's like, okay, well, we got to call the service interruptions desk, which is like, hey, we have a big problem. We have a service interruption of something, like we need extra backup. And they call and they tell us to call a biohazard contractor that was called Aftermath, which is a great company name, not sponsored, whatever, but the name makes me giggle. So we call Aftermath, tell them this whole story, the whole detail about all the thing, the poo, and the oh my God. And they're like, okay, we'll send somebody. Meantime, I go over to my computer and I'm looking stuff up on this engine, and I look out at it again, and I realize that it's one of the units tagged from Pasco, Washington, that has extra tags on it that says Pasco Hump Unit, yard use only. And that's when it clicked for me. The reason this thing's never got a defect against it is because it's the pair to a remote control locomotive that works the hump yard in Pasco. Pasco's the big kind of division point, big hump yard in the Northwest. And that means that conductor's playing with basically a belt pack controller, like a video game controller almost, and he's running the locomotive from that. The only time he's going to be in the cab of either of these engines is to go do his business and then leave, or to set it up or whatever. And so dudes didn't have to sit for a 12-hour shift in this cab where it smells god-awful. They just go in, oh man, smellier than usual, whatever, and then left. So, oh, okay, no trauma, no, oh my God, I had to smell this forever, no defect. So had this been any other engine, this probably would have been found a lot sooner, but here we are at this thing. So a couple hours pass, second shift's almost coming to a close, and a Ford Mustang rolls into the parking lot, comes up to the supervisor's side. It was separate from where all the employees parked because the time clock was by the break room and our office was the other part of the roundhouse. Ford Mustang. It's like, okay, I was expecting like a company truck or something. This guy gets out, climbs up the stairs, opens the door to the office, comes in, and he's shaking off sleep out of his eyes. And he just goes, hey man, they called me on my day off. They said that you had a toilet to look at. I just, oh buddy, it's not a toilet. You need to come look at this. So we can talk about the procedures for escorting a visitor who's not shop personnel into the shop, the whole thing. Take him on the engine. He goes and he shines a light down, sees the thing, and he just goes, yeah, I'm gonna need backup. It's like, well, yeah, could have told you that. We told your boss on the directory that this whole story, and apparently they didn't believe us. Whatever. So another hour passes by, third shift begins, and up comes the big vacuum sucker truck with, the backup has arrived, the cavalry's here. And unfortunately, because the way the cab was set up or something, they said even if we moved it outside, they couldn't use the vacuum truck because the hose or something. So they had to go clean this thing out by hand. It's like, oh my God. So the guy and his partner who showed up in the vacuum truck go to start cleaning it out. And I mean, it took them like 4 or 5 hours to clean out by hand and with limited tools, all the waste, and bag it up and everything. And like I said, this is their worst day in a while. This was my, like, don't say, oh my God, this was my worst day at work. Like, this was not my problem, right? They had to come out and dry heave a couple times. They had the whole onesie and the respirators and everything, and I felt really bad for them. And they had to bag up and box up the waste, and it was human biohazard and everything. And they finally finish up, get it all clean. The next day, things were going to get welded and put back together and whatever, and get the engine back in service. But as they're carrying the waste out, they're walking past the foreman's office, going through the foreman's office, past my desk as I'm working on whatever. They're carrying these big, heavy boxes, all this literal poop and pee out. And they just keep hauling more and more of them. It's like, good God, that's a That's a lot. Okay, whatever. And I will never forget, I got handed the slip by the guy, and I had to sign off as the supervisor and approve the expense and all that stuff for the company. And it included the weight of the waste, because they had to weigh it out and everything, and that was part of the billing process. And it was literally just like 2,000 pounds. It was like 2,000 and some change, but literally about 2,000 pounds, a literal shit ton. So if you ever need a character reference for what a shit ton looks like, give me a call, or just imagine the nose of an SD40, 18 inches deep, thereabouts. That'll be about right. Oh, jeez. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and if you want some more railroad stories or anything like that, by all means, let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching.